Okay, now here's where the rubber meets the road. This is where it starts to get fun. You find out, you put all the raw information in as you've got it. You've tried to figure out the purchase price, and now you're going to see whether this deal is actually a deal or not. So what we do here is you now jump over to the CFA, the cash flow analysis. This page is where everything comes together, and this is where I go once I get all the information in to make sure that we've got a good deal. Look at the way that this screen is broken up. There are 5 categories: the rental activity analysis, the property resale analysis, the cash position, the financial measurements. Let me take that back. There are actually 4. And then the years. Okay, fine, there are 5. Let me show you how I now analyze this particular page to determine whether I have a deal or not. I'm going to go through each one of these categories, but the one that's most important to me, the first one that I look at, is the financial measurements section. I go right for the debt coverage ratio. That's the first thing that I look for. It is, as you can see here, 1.93. For those of you that have been in my seminars, you know what I call the debt coverage ratio. I call it my sleep number. It tells me how well I can sleep at night. In this particular case, at that purchase price of $1.6 million, this property is running at a debt coverage ratio of 1.93. That's a solid deal. That's a good number. I would proceed forward with looking at these numbers. Next number I look down here is the cash on cash return with the equity. And in this particular case, I'm sorry, cash on cash return before taxes, not with the equity, but before taxes. This property, as I've at 1.6, is running at a 22% expense ratio. I'm sorry, 22% cash on cash return. Great deal. I like the price 1.6. The things that once of course, it's got the internal rate of return of almost 50%. Property's looking good. Now, what I also then do is I come up here to the potential rental income. I check the NOI. There's the number right there for the NOI. It makes it nice and neat and easy to follow. Now, right here in this property resale analysis, this is very interesting, and I'm going to show you how this can be manipulated, or what you need to look at in just a moment. But here, the number that is put here is the projected sales price of the property at the end of the first year, after taking out the selling expenses of 6% that we put in there on the input data screen. If you can remember that, I think it was section number 3. At that cap rate that we put in there, about 8.5. So we created the potential of this projected sales price. The number there is based upon assumptions that we made back on the input data screen. Now, let me show you what happened. So at the end of the first year, if we sold this property, the sales proceeds would be $406,000. All right, now that takes in, then you got to take out the equity and all that other stuff. Gives you an idea that at the end of the first year, you got almost a 50% cash on cash internal rate of return if you sold the property had you purchased it at 1.6 million. All right, looking good, looking very, very good. Now, let's jump back for a second here to the input screen. Remember, we said that at an 8.5 cap, this property is worth 1.7 million. What happens if it was only if it was a 6 cap? All right, if the property was at a 6 cap, look what happened. The difference from the contract price to the end of year 1 valuation, 2.5. Okay, how did that change our numbers? As you can see here, now the projected sales price at that lower cap rate is now 2.5 million. Our sales proceeds are 1.1, and as you can see, look at it, did nothing to the debt coverage ratio. Why? Because the cap rate has no impact on the debt on the property. All right, so that's why that didn't change. But look what happened to the internal rate of return, 268%. Okay, obviously these are crazy numbers. I'm using the absurd numbers to really give you a better picture of how this software works. Now let's jump back over to the input data. Remember, we said it was an 8.5 cap. We'll go back to that 8.5 cap. But at 8.5 cap, the property is worth 1.7. Now, what happens if they're asking 2 million? What happens to the numbers then? Do we have a deal? Well, the first thing I do when I see this is I look at and see that they're asking 2 million. They want me to make an offer in 2 million. At an 8.5 cap, the property is only worth 1.785 million. So I know right away, just by looking at this screen, that my offer of $2 million is going to be too high based upon the market. Do I really want to make an offer that high? Let me show you what happens to the CFA. This is very interesting. Now look what happened here. Obviously, the net operating income didn't change. That doesn't change when we fool around with the asking price. But look at what happened to the projected sales price, 1.785. That's what we figure the property is worth at the end of the first year based upon that cap rate. And so at the sales proceeds at the end, okay, we barely broke even, $88,000. But look what happens. We have to take out all of the selling expenses and the original investment. We lose money. Remember, we lose money at that $2 million purchase price, and that's where the losses show up, right there. So that tells you what happens to the property if you were to sell it at the end of these years at that based upon that purchase price and that cap rate. Now look what happened here. Obviously, debt coverage ratio changed. We put more debt on the property. Look at the cash on cash return, 13%. It's not the 22 that it used to be. All right, but 13 is still fine. That is how I use the cash flow analysis section of the cash flow analyzer in order to determine if I have a deal. What I would do in this particular case is I'd jump back to the input screen. I'd fix the price, let's say at 1.7 million, and take a look at the CFA again. Now you still got a beautiful debt coverage ratio of 1.82. And you've got a nice cash on cash return before taxes, 20%, internal rate of return, 16%. Okay, you know what? That 1.7, the numbers work. So that is how I would do it. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is the goal seek function of the cash flow analyzer. This is a great tool. I just want to show you how it works and how to use it. I'll see you on the next video.